the last chapter of Hebrews. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו לעסוק בדברי תורה. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and has commanded us to be engaged in the words of the Torah. O Lord our God, we ask that you make the words of your Torah sweet in our mouths and in the mouth of your people, the house of Israel. May we, our descendant and the descendants of your people, the house of Israel, know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, O Lord, who teaches Torah to his people Israel. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who chooses us from all the people and gives us his Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord, giver of the Torah. Amen. Okay. Like I said, this is the last chapter. I'm going to bring you something to sit on. The letter concludes with a list of commands. It's important, though, to understand the rationale behind these commands. The rationale was that thirsty. The rationale actually of the whole letter to the Jewish Messianic disciples of Yeshua was that since we serve a commander-in-chief that is greater than the greatest angel, greater than any high priest, greater than Moshe, one who gives an even greater Shabbat, flowing from a greater covenant based on greater promises and greater premises. Since we serve such a commander-in-chief, it is very, very important that you, and I'll start at the end of chapter 12, starting verse 12. It's important that you lift up your drooping hands and strengthen your weak knees. It's important that you make straight paths for your feet, so that what is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed. You see, because we serve such a master, that should be our reaction. Our reaction is to criticize like men, encourage others. It's important that we strive for peace with everyone. He did say everyone. And for the holiness, we strive for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. Without living a set-apart life, we do not see. He is set apart. So, without being set apart, we do not see him. It's important that we see to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God. So we take care of ourselves, but we also take care of others. That's the goal. You know, when you're in an airplane, you know, they always give that big long speech. It's not very long, but that security and safety thing, you know. And when they show you that the oxygen masks will come down if there's any problem, and they tell you put yours on first so you can help others. You see, if somebody needs help, we need to, it's not so, well, I'm taken care of, you know. We take care of ourselves so we can be allowed to do it to others. So that's what we do. We get the face masks to help others. See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. So if you want to know about that, you've got to listen to last week's teaching. It's on the Yididei Adonai video page. And see to it that no one is sexually immoral or unholy like Esau, who sold his birthright for a single meal. Now, we're getting to chapter 13, and in this next chapter, our author continues his list. A list that I think is as valid for them then as it is for us today. In this list, he exalts us again with the ideas that since we serve a commander-in-chief that is greater than the greatest angel, greater than any high priest, greater than Moshe, who gives us a greater Shabbat flowing from a greater covenant based on greater premises and promises, therefore we should, as a result of serving such a master, such a commander-in-chief, we should, Hebrews 13:1, let brotherly love, brotherly friendship continue. Since we serve such a person, it is our duty to let brotherly friendship continue. This is actually based on a Tanakh, on a Torah injunction. It's based on Leviticus 19:18, which says, "You shall not take vengeance or bear grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your brother as yourself. I am the Lord." This "I am the Lord" is like the signature. I say that, so pay attention. He also tells us, so whereas he tells us to love our brothers and sisters, he also reminds us in Hebrews 13:2 to not forget to be friendly to outsiders. For in so doing, some people, without knowing it, have entertained angels. So here he says to be friendly to outsiders. Outsiders are people who are not part of our group. The people, from the other congregation, the other political party, the other religion, maybe even enemies. The landlord, the mother-in-law, the loan officer, the other race, the other culture. He says, be friendly to outsiders, those outside of your group. By saying it this way, by saying, for in so doing some people without knowing it have entertained angels, the author alludes to Abraham, who received angels disguised as desert travelers in the plains of Mamre. In the context of the story, Abraham lived in the inner land long owned by Canaanites. He was a stranger in the land of promise. He was a guest. And to be a guest, there's a lot of compromising to do. It's not a very sure situation. So here, Abraham, he was a guest in a enemy land. He was told that eventually his family is going to inherit that land. I don't know if he told Mamre, because that would be, I don't know if he would be too happy about that. But he saw these three travelers. He didn't know who they were. They were desert people. But hospitality was one of the main ministries of Abraham. So there are lots of stories in Midrash about that. And one of them is that Abraham used to send Eliezer, his servant. So Eliezer, he's got a name, a very nice name, Eliezer, my help of my God. My help is my God. The help of my God. Something like that. Or the help of my God. Anyway, so, oh, my God is my help. So he would send his servant, the helper of God, to the highways and byways in the desert. I don't know if you've ever been in a desert, but it's not like you cross one block and you're going to have a highway. You know, he would send his servant to find travelers, to beg them and compel them to come into his tent, to the tent of Abraham. It was one of the, he didn't wait for somebody to pass by. He went, he said his servant, go find me some guests. Go find me some guests. You know, so, and when the guests will come, I mean, when you're a desert traveler guest, you know, it's not like you come for a sandwich and you go. Maybe use the restroom or something and that's it. It's a 3-4 day event. You got to take care of the camels, you wash their feet, you provide a party for them. I don't know, desert cheeks, maybe they have dancers, whatever, you know, but you provide, hospitality was a great thing. And Abraham, we're told of that story in very specific terms. I don't know if he had dancers, but we're told that Abraham himself, he had servants, he had people who could take care of it. He himself took care of the hosting. He made sure that the right thing were provided, you know, and but he himself went and took care of it. And it says he ran to the guests when they arrived. I mean, it's a very important point of hospitality. And then he prepared them a feast in those 3 angels, you know. But there in the Midrash, okay, I'm mixing the Midrash with the Bible story, but the Midrash tells us that he would serve them a copious meal. And when they were done, and they wanted to thank Abraham, he said, no, don't thank me. Thank the person who provided the meal. And then they asked, oh really, who was that? And that was his cue to tell them about the one true God who made heaven and earth, the compassionate God. So he was using hospitality as a form of a way to present who is God, because hospitality is a very important notion in the Bible. To receive the stranger, one of the Torah commandments is to be kind to the stranger in the land. It is forbidden to oppress the stranger. We have to be kind. It's a very big sin. Why? Because Israel is meant to remember as they were oppressed as strangers in a strange land. And of course, we remember Egypt. So the idea is very similar. Don't do to others what you don't want them to do to you, and do to others what you want them to do to you. You know, it's very simple. So here we are told to remember, to understand strangers, for in so doing some people without knowing it have entertained angels, like Abraham did. Really, he didn't know who these 3 angels were at first. So here the writer reminds us of Abraham. And that's important, because Yeshua said that if we are sons of Abraham, we should also do the works of Abraham. People who claim they're descendant of Abraham physically, biologically, or spiritually being grafted in, they are meant to do the works of Abraham. And hospitality is very important. Being kind to strangers, being kind to those outside the fellowship. Hebrews 13:3 continues with the list of what we should do because we serve such a great commander-in-chief. He says, remember those in prison and being mistreated as if you were in prison with them and undergoing their tortures yourself. In those days, prisoners had no rights. They didn't have a government-provided 3 square healthy meals a day, access to a gym, air conditioning, as well as an opportunity to watch TV and get education. They didn't have all that. They didn't have access to a government-provided defense lawyer. But actually the Jewish system of law, the Torah system of law, was much more humane than in the countries around Israel. If you remember, we read a few weeks ago about the cities of refuge. The cities of refuge were really a way for a criminal, whether he was guilty or not, to find protection until a judgment is drawn. It was a city of refuge was the equivalent of today, the right to a defense lawyer, and to the right to a trial. The Roman government only gave right to a trial to their citizens, not to anybody else. But we're told to not do that in the Torah. So there were many Jews, and even traditional and Messianic Jews who were in jail in those days. And the writer says, remember them. Remember that. And some were in jail justifiably, maybe they were criminals, and some were in jail just because of persecution. But we're supposed to remember them all. Somebody who's in jail because he did something wrong, we need to remember them too. Peter says about this, he says, in 1 Peter 2:19 through 23 says, it is a gracious thing when mindful of God one endures sorrow while suffering unjustly. So to be unjustly punished and to endure it, it's righteous. It brings it has it's a virtue. Then he says, for what credit is it if when you sin and are beaten for it, you endure it? But if when you do good and suffer for it, you endure, this is a gracious thing in the sight of God. For to this you have been called, because Messiah also suffered for you, leaving you an example so that you might follow in his steps. So there are many people who are in prisons, rightfully, and some for just persecution. But even if they are, we're going to pray for them that they don't lose hope. And the attitude against persecution for righteousness' sake, our reaction should be to endure, to suffer it, because wow, there's virtue in this. It's recommendable. He remembers, he's going to see, Hashem's going to see. And he says, rejoice, Yeshua says in such a case, when you are persecuted for righteousness' sake, because such have endured the prophets before you. So he said, For to this ye have been called, because Messiah also suffered for you, leaving you an example so that you might follow in his steps. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. So, in our prayers and encouragement to those who are in jail, that's what we need to remind them. Not to rebel, and there's a word I'm looking for. There's virtue in doing that. The commandment is, remember those in prison and being mistreated as if you were in prison with them and undergoing their torture yourself. Empathy is also part of being like Messiah. We're talking about being like Messiah here. Empathy, to have feeling for the suffering of others. Paul urges us to mourn with those who mourn, cry with those who cry, and rejoice with those who rejoice. That's in Romans 12:15. Now, we continue with this therefore that we should do, that list of commands that we should do, because we serve such a great commander-in-chief. He will continue by telling believers to make sure that marriage is clean. For us, it might be a duh statement. But much like today in Israel and in most modern countries, promiscuous Hellenism has a big influence in Israel in those days. So they needed to be reminded. And again, against that influence, it says, marriage is honorable in every respect. In particular, sex within marriage is pure. That's Hebrews 13:4. But God will indeed punish fornicators and adulterers. So, this might be a duh thing, but gotta watch out, because I have known people, and even till this day, there are some people who use the Bible to justify fornication and adultery. Well, we got to remember, it's part of the works of the flesh, not the fruit of the works of the flesh, not the works of the Spirit. So we can't do that. Here he's telling the believers that they should be careful about these things. Another thing he warns us to do, he tells us to do, because we serve such a great commander-in-chief. In 13:5 he says, keep your lives free from the love of money, and be satisfied with what you have. For God himself has said, I will never fail you or abandon you. When we have a love of money, it's because we don't have faith that God will take care of us. When we have the love of money, all the decisions of our lives are ran by it. What business we accept doing or not. Who we marry. Who we make friends with. It's all based on our love for money. The personal values we compromise or not. The example, the passage that the writer of the letter to Hebrew uses when he says, for God himself has said, I will never fail you or abandon you, comes from Joshua 1:5, where the full passage says, no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. So he uses, when a writer like this uses a particular passage to prove a point, is proving a big point. And the point here is that Joshua was the new leader entering the promised land, and he's telling him, look, as I was with Moshe, I'll be with you. So the writer is, when he writes the Jewish people in Israel, the believers, he's telling them the same thing. as God has provided and made miracles for Israel, I'll be with you. Paul taught Timothy that the love of money is the root of all evil. That 1 Timothy 6:10. Timothy was a young leader that Paul was mentoring. And that the way he was teaching, that the way to be free from this the clamps of the love of money is to be satisfied with what we have. Paul teaches that godliness with contentment is great gain. Godliness with contentment is great gain. It's beautiful. It's the type of attitude that frees us from the clamps of the love of money. Our author continues, Hebrews 13:6. Therefore, I like this therefore because it comprises everything that's before and it gives us something, a challenge. Therefore, we say with confidence, Adonai is my helper, I will not be afraid. What can human beings do to me? That comes from Psalm 54:4. And David had many enemies, Psalms 54:4. We say with confidence, Adonai is my helper, I will not be afraid. What can a human being do to me? It's not like, I was reading a story about a lady who was on a ship and the ship was sinking. There was a big storm, and it seems like the ship was in really bad shape. And a lady, she goes to the captain and she asks him what's going on. He says, well, this and this and that, and gives us a pretty dire report. And she says, oh no, what are we going to do? And the captain, who was a believer, tells her, well, madam, I guess we're just going to have to trust the Lord. And she says, oh no, has it come to that? That's not the attitude we should have. We need to say with confidence, Adonai is my helper, I will not be afraid. What can a human being do to me? Then, as part of the therefore, the things we should do because we serve such a great commander-in-chief, we should make sure that the leaders are respected, honored, and supported, the leaders of the Messianic congregation. Really, without their hard work, the flock will be directionless. And about that he says in verse 13:7, he says, remember your leaders, those who spoke God's message to you, those who teach you. Reflect on the result of their way of life and imitate their trust. Leaders of the flock are actually responsible to model an exemplary lifestyle that people can choose to emulate. It says here, reflect on the result of their way of life and imitate their trust. Paul even said in, I think it's Romans 11:1, imitate me as I'm also an imitator of Messiah. No pressure here for leaders. Our author then reminds us that Yeshua the Messiah is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And amen to that. Amen to that. He's the same yesterday. He's telling them, look, you remember when he was on earth, he did this, and amazing, right? Well, he's the same today. The way he was yesterday that you remember, he's the same today. And he will be the same in the future. That's for us, guys. This verse is telling them, how he was. And well, he's the same today. And he says hi to us. He says, and forever. It's nice. About teachers, he says, emulate the lifestyle of your teachers. I won't spend a bit of time on that one. Many people taught many things in those days. Everybody wanted to be a teacher. you know. So it's a little bit the same today. So the author, because of the situation in those days, with teaching being uncertain teachings being inserted in the congregation, he says, don't be carried away by various strange teachings. That's Hebrews 13:9. You see, in those days there were people teaching esoteric, secret teachings. They were called Gnostics. They always had something new to teach. And people are usually attracted to something new. There's something that nobody ever heard. You know, so I know because I have a special connection, you know, and nobody else knows that, but I do. You know, so people are very attracted to that. There was actually in Athens, it was kind of a way of life. It says in Acts 17:21, it says all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there would spend their time in nothing except telling or hearing something new. Of that attitude, Paul warns young leader Timothy again with, he says that one day, he says, it's in 2 Timothy 4:3-4, it says that the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, they will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions. I love that. Having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teaching to suit their own passions, and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander off into myths. For what is good for the heart, is for the heart to be strengthened by grace, not by food. People who have made this the focus of their lives have not benefited thereby. So people who have made the focus of their lives teachers who suit their own passions, they have not benefited thereby. I want to go over that again. For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions. It is good to learn, but as we search learning, we should make sure we learn right. What Paul is talking about here is people who, instead of searching for to be taught the truth that they don't know and that they need to learn, they go looking for teachers that confirm their own ignorant conclusions. And they say, wow, this guy is really intelligent. He's teaching them stuff that they already feel or believe. He's not telling them anything that they don't know, but he confirms their own ignorance. And they call that person intelligent. That's what he says. Teachers to suit their own passions. You know, if you want to believe that, well, there's, you know, the guy who thinks like you and confirms what you feel, well, you're going to call him intelligent. But this, he says, causes them to turn away from listening to the truth and wander off into myths. You see, education is like fishing. Whether it is crab, catfish, shrimp, trout, or salmon, you choose the fishing body and the fishing style according to what you want to catch. Learning and education is the same thing. Not every knowledge is good. You know, if you want to catch the truth, if you want to catch kosher fish, you go to a body that has it. If you want to catch catfish or shrimp, you go to a body that has it. Not every knowledge is good. There was a tree whose fruit was the knowledge of good and evil. And we were not supposed to eat of that fruit. But we were given a choice. We told, hey, it's there. Just don't eat it. And today we're given the same choice. The same choice that Moshe put Israel in front of. He says, look, I put before you life and death. Choose life. But you can choose death if you want. So we choose what we learn. We choose the teachers we go under. Everybody we learn from has some sort of education, but where does their education come from? From a river which will yield kosher trout or salmon, or from a pond which will yield bottom fish? Do they teach from a personal knowledge and experience of linguistics, culture, based on other people properly educated in the same? Or is their teaching based on personal theories pulled out of their heart? As far as vetting teachers and teachings, Yeshua says in Matthew 7:15-20, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing. They pretend to have the truth, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. They take you away. They look like sheep, but they divide the body. So how do we make the difference? Well, he says, you will recognize them by their fruit. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? In other words, will you get an honorable, altruistic, humble, conscientious-minded, and meek disciple from a tree of division, pride, selfishness, and arrogance? Verse 17 by Yeshua. So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. Verse 18. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor a diseased tree bear good fruit. So what he's saying here is a tree that is diseased by division, pride, selfishness, arrogance, cannot bring the healthy fruit of an honorable, altruistic, humble, consensus-minded, and meek disciple. Period. It is very simple. Verse 19, every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Yikes. Basically what he's telling us is vet teachers and teachings. He's telling us to vet them. That's simple. So how do we do that? Now, I'm going to propose something. I always say, don't judge a teacher by their curriculum vitae. Because you can have very extensive learning and still not teach the truth. How do you judge it? So the next thing I always say, judge them by their lives, look at their lives. But even that doesn't work very much, because let's say I'm a person who likes controversy, opposition. Let's say I'm very proud and arrogant and divisive. I'm going to look at somebody proud, arrogant, and divisive and say, wait, I want to follow this guy. He is good. He's awesome. Why? Because he's just the same way as I am. So the way we judge others might very well be as compared to ourselves. So if we have a hunger for these things, anybody who brings what's this word, division or controversy, we like, but that's not how we're supposed to judge. Yes, it is right, we judge by people's lives, but what we judge is what fruit are there in their lives, because the fruit tell us about the tree. So what are the fruits of the work of the flesh? Sexual immorality, impurity. This is in Galatians 5. Sensuality, idolatry. And we've talked about all these things in our classes on the DDK. Sorcery, enmity. So here we go. So, we have the very dull one. Yeah, sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality. We know all this. Yeah. Idolatry, of course. Sorcery, yeah, we would never do that. But we talked about those in DDK class. But then he said, enmity. Strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness. Oh, those are really a bit more common to us. Drunkenness, the Bible tells us to enjoy a glass of wine for joy, but not to be drunk, out of control, rolling under the table. No, we don't do that. Orgies and things like this. So he says those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. So if this is a good vetting, this is a good list for vetting. If a teacher or teaching promotes these things, any of these things, and that's including enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions and divisions, and envy, stay away from it. Because he says the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Those are the things that belong to those who live by the Spirit. Those are the fruit of the Spirit. That's how we vet. That's how we vet. And I think that's a very good way to do it. So he was saying here, people who have made these funny teachings and teachers, the focus of their lives have not benefited thereby. That means that people who pay attention to these weird teachings pay a heavy price. About teachings, Yeshua also quotes the Torah when he says, by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses let every word be established. That doesn't mean that by the mouth of 2 or 3 people who believe the same. That would be too easy. Examples of 2 or 3 witnesses would be, for example, if an idea is corroborated by the Tanakh as a whole, as well as by historical accounts, and maybe a visual account by a vetted scholarly source. Those are the types of witnesses we're just teaching. One time somebody presented me with some sort of new doctrine, and I remember I only had 5 minutes to give an account because there was a meeting starting and I needed to go to the bathroom. I just had an hour drive. So I thought, wait. So I went to the bathroom and came back. And I said, all in all, what you told me, where is it written in the Torah? He says, well, that's simple. And in that case, you couldn't even find historical accounts of what that person was saying. So, any doctrine, belief, or statement needs to be vetted and verified by 2 or 3 of these types of witnesses. An intuition, a hunch, or a gut feeling is not a reliable witness. Now the author of the letter to the Hebrews, is going to enter another subject. And it will be the subject that defines everything we have learned so far about Yeshua being greater than the greatest angel, greater than any high priest, greater than Moshe, who gives a greater Shabbat based on greater promises and greater premises. Our author is now telling us that we serve at a higher and more important altar. He says, Hebrews 13:10, we have an altar from which those who serve in the tent are not permitted to eat. That's very simple. That's very simple. We serve at the higher altar, and that's something we talked about last lesson. So if you want to know what we're talking about, you have to go to Yedidei Adonai webpage, to the video tab, and you have to write to us to get the password to that video page tab. So he talks about the higher altar, and there he comes back to this altar, and he says in Hebrews 13:10, we have an altar from which those who serve in the tent are not permitted to eat. So Levites who serve in the temple below are not allowed to eat of the offering of the temple above. You know, just actually like it said before, Yeshua, if he were on earth, would not be able to serve in the temple because he's not from Levi. Well, the Levites are not allowed to go to our altar either. So the author knows that his Hebrew readers know what he's talking about because they know it from the book of Leviticus. Verse 11, for the Kohen HaGadol, the high priest, brings the blood of animals into the holiest place as a sin offering, but their bodies are burnt outside the camp. So this is really important. You know, yeah, and for that I'm going to let Daniel Lancaster explain. He says, the slaughter and burning of the red heifer took place outside the camp. Ordinarily, the Almighty prohibits sacrifice made outside the sanctuary. The red heifer is an exception to the rule. The priesthood, and we're going to read about the red heifer in 3 weeks, I think. The priesthood slaughtered and burned the red heifer in a ritually pure place outside the camp. In temple times, the walls of Jerusalem marked the boundaries of the camp. The priesthood burned the red heifer on the Mount of Olives, outside the city walls and directly across from the Temple Mount. They burned the bodies of the sin offerings in the same location, outside. The writer of the book of Hebrews saw a messianic foreshadowing in the location of the burning. And then I read from there Hebrews 13:11 through 13, which says, for the bodies of those animals whose blood is brought into the holy place by the high priest as an offering for sin are burnt outside the camp. Therefore Yeshua also, that he might sanctify the people through his own blood, suffered outside the gate. So let us go out to him outside the camp, bearing his reproach. Like Daniel Lancaster continues by saying, like the red heifer taken outside the city to be slaughtered, Yeshua died outside Jerusalem walls. The writer of the book of Hebrew takes the parallel even further. Just as the red heifer's sacrifice purified people from the contamination incurred by death, Yeshua's sacrifice cleanses from the contamination of sin, which leads to death. The book of Hebrews observes that if the ashes of a heifer sprinkling those who have been defiled sanctify for the cleansing of the flesh, how much more would the blood of Messiah spiritually cleanse a person from sin? That's from Hebrews 9 verses 13-14, which we also have a video about. The apocryphal epistle of Barnabas discusses the messianic symbolism involved in the ceremony of the red heifer. According to Barnabas, the heifer symbolizes Yeshua and his atoning sacrifice for sin. Barnabas develops the symbolism further, identifying the priests who slaughter the heifer with the priesthood that put Yeshua to death. those who sprinkle the water with the disciple, who transmit the good news, and the scarlet wool, cedar, and hyssop with the cross of Yeshua. So we'll be reading a bit more about the red heifer in 3 weeks if you follow the Parasha. So this is what he's talking about. So now we understand what he says. And so too, in Hebrews 13:12, so too Yeshua suffered death outside the gate in order to make the people holy through his own blood. Now comes another challenge for the first century Messianic Jewish congregation and for us. The author invokes several images in these passages. We read about sin offering, the red heifer, the location of the burning of the sin offering and of the red heifer. But now he says, therefore let us go out to him who is outside the camp and share his disgrace. Share his disgrace. We want to share his glory, but there we're told, no, share his disgrace. We all want to rule and reign, share the glory, yeah. No, share the disgrace. Disgrace comes before glory. Let's look at this now from the standpoint of the culture of the day. This is explained by David Stern, who put together the complete Jewish Bible and is a member of Netiv Messianic congregation in Jerusalem. He says, just as lepers and other people declared impure had to remain outside the camp in disgrace, so Yeshua was wrongfully regarded as impure and suffered death, with disgrace being executed as a criminal on a stake outside the gate at Golgotha. So remember also that Messianic Jews in those days felt separated from their own people. David Stern continues, being outside the camp in disgrace implies not only impurity but separation from the people. Yeshua is indeed separated. However, his separation is in fact not from the Jewish people due to impurity, but unto God due to his holiness. So that his separation from the Jewish people is wrongful, illusory, and not disgraceful. Moreover, he can make the Jewish people holy through his own blood, ending their very real and justified separation from God due to sin, as he also can end the justified and real separation of Gentiles from God due to sin. Messianic Jews who go out to him who is outside the camp to share his disgrace remain, like him, part of the Jewish people, even though like him we may not be so regarded. Like Yeshua, we experience the pain of exclusion, but we must stand with him and not seek respect or inclusion on any terms except God's. This is very, very... You can find this commentary if you have a complete Jewish Bible, commentary to the complete Jewish Bible, to the commentary to the New Testament of the complete Jewish Bible. That's where you find this. This is very important to understand. So then the author of the letter to the Hebrews continues with the idea of seeming separation. For we have no, verse 14 of chapter 13, for we have no permanent city here, but on the contrary, we seek the one to come. Like Abraham, who left his home to seek a city. Like Moshe, who left Egypt's palace. Through him, therefore, verse 15, let us offer God a sacrifice of praise continually. Quit you complaining. The Parasha this week, Be'ahar Lotcha, is about complaining, which is a form of idolatry. So he said, let us offer God a sacrifice of praise continually, for this is the natural product of the lips that acknowledge his name. Wow. To praise is the natural product of lips that acknowledge his name. We talked about praise 2 weeks ago, I think. You cannot murmur and praise. But if you acknowledge his name, it's got to be in praise. It's easy to praise God in the light, but we should also praise Him in the dark. Verse 16, but don't forget doing good and sharing with others, for with such sacrifices God is well pleased. We cannot do the sacrifices at the temple. There's no temple, and we're not even in Jerusalem, but doing good and sharing with others, that a sacrifice He is well. There's some sacrifices He's not well pleased, like if we come and make an offering and we have somebody has something wrong against us, He says, leave it here. Go fix your relationship with your brother. He's not pleased with those. He was not pleased with Cain's sacrifice, but with doing good and sharing with others, He's pleased with those. More about leaders, verse 17. Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they keep watch over your lives as people who will have to render an account. Oh boy. So make it a task of joy for them, not one of groaning, for that is of no advantage to you. Keep praying for us, for we are certain that we have a clear conscience and want to conduct ourselves properly in everything we do. So here is as a leader, he was with other people when he wrote those. This, and he says, I believe we have a clear conscience and we want to conduct ourselves properly in everything we do. And I would believe that the standard of this person is pretty high. The bar is pretty high. And all the more, I beg you to do this, that I may be restored to you that much sooner. The God of Shalom brought up from the dead the great shepherd of the sheep, Yeshua. Our Lord Yeshua, by the blood of an eternal covenant, may Hashem equip you with every good thing you need to do His will. Amen. May He do that. And may He do in us whatever pleases Him through Yeshua the Messiah. Oh no, we're not asking Him to do something. Give us money and freedom and happiness. Make sure our rights are protected. Now He says, may He do in us whatever pleases Him through Yeshua the Messiah. To Him be the glory forever and ever. Amen. Then he ends with, now I urge you, brothers, to bear with my message of exhortation, for I have written you only briefly. This was a brief letter. Know that your brother Timothy has been released. Yeah, he's released. If he comes soon enough, I will bring him with him when I come to see you. So the writer was planning to go back to Israel with Timothy. Greet all your leaders and all God's people. The people from Italy send greetings to you. So we know he was writing from Italy. Wasn't Paul in prison in Rome? Grace be with you all. Amen. And that will be it for our reading of the letter to the Hebrews. I hope you found it very interesting. Now let's do the praise, which is the natural product of lips that honor His name.